Welcome to our Mothers Out Front Massachusetts Climate Action Call. Since we have some new faces here today, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves in the chat. You can share your name, where you're calling in from, and which organization you're with today. I'm Diane Sokol. I'm a member of Mothers Out Front Brookline chapter, and I also work with the statewide campaign team. For those of you who are not familiar with the Mothers Out Front climate action calls, in the next 45 minutes, you will learn about a specific climate issue and we will take focused action together. As federal support of climate solutions is disappearing, we look to Massachusetts to take bold climate action and set an example for other states. Today, we will be learning about the developing status of climate bills in our state legislature. We will be hearing from State Senator Michael Barrett, a true climate champion and the author of the most significant climate legislation to come out of the Massachusetts legislature over recent sessions. Sorry. Here's a quick preview of the agenda for our climate action call. After a brief introduction, we will hear from Senator Barrett, and there will be time for just a few questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, please put that question in the chat. We won't be able to unmute people. After the Q&A, we will move on to our action. We've set aside about 12 minutes on this call to take action together. Then we will come back together for a few important announcements and next steps, and we will end this meeting promptly at 12:45. So we do hope you'll stay until the end. Before we get going, I'll quickly go over a few norms for this meeting. Please rename yourself in Zoom, as I said before, to include your name, your city or town, and if you like, an organization you're with. Be sure to mute yourself when we're together in the main room if you're not already muted. It is important that we all remain muted today. You can use the chat to share comments or questions during the call. Closed captioning is available, and you should be able to access that tool at the bottom of the screen. And finally, we are recording this climate action call. If you do not want to be seen in the recording, please use the Zoom controls to turn off your video. I would like to introduce now Karen Kraut, a member of Mothers Out Front and Gas Transition Allies. She will introduce our special guest speaker.
Hi, everybody. It is a real honor to be the person to introduce Senator Michael Barrett today. Senator Barrett represents the 3rd Middlesex District in the Massachusetts legislature. He is the Assistant Majority Leader in the Senate and the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, where most climate legislation originates. Senator Barrett was the chief architect of 3 major climate bills that has made Massachusetts a leader among the states in responding to the climate crisis. Last session, in the face of great pressure from the House and the governor to leave Mothers Out Front's top priority gas transition provisions out of the omnibus climate bill, Senator Barrett refused to yield and succeeded in keeping those vital gas transition provisions in the bill that became law. Not only is the senator smart and strategic, he is gracious and always willing to meet with advocates to hear our concerns and ideas. We asked Senator Barrett to talk with us today about what is expected this session in terms of the content of the climate bill being developed and the anticipated process for the bill. What opposition might we expect? And what advice he has for us to effectively advocate for the best climate bill possible this session. We are going to turn the slides off during the senator's remarks. Since there are so many of us on the call today, again, we ask that you stay muted and put any questions that you may have for the senator into the chat. There will be 5 minutes for Q&A when the senator is finished presenting. And with that, I present to you our climate champion, Senator Barrett. The senator, you're muted right now. Christine, I think you have to unmute the senator.
I made him a co-host.
You have to unmute him, I guess, deliberately.
Deb, can you help with that?
We're working on it, Senator.
Sorry. I've lost my participants.
Are you sure he's a co-host?
Now I can't even find.
Let me see if I can do something because I think I'm a co-host.
I'm unmuted.
Oh,
I'm liberated.
Yay!
Wow, I'll tell you, that's exciting and a little stressful to be fiddling with this technology. Karen, that is such a kind introduction. You understated the role that you've played and the role that Mothers Out Front has played. It is true that that the Senate was able to keep your stuff in. On the other hand, you guys did generate the stuff. So I'm very grateful to Mothers Out Front. You guys have been in the fray for a long time now, and isn't it stunning and not always positive the way life continues to gyrate and present us with new, well, occasionally opportunities, but challenges as well. We find ourselves in a funny pivot right now. And there are those who would like to see more pivoting than we would be comfortable with. So I do want to talk about the moment politically that we're in. And I want to emphasize that Mothers Out Front over the course of the next 7 or 8 months really does have to be vigilant and very active. Trump changes everything. I am sad to be observing that. His aggression and success in bottling up policymaking in Washington does have these ripple effects. As in so many other things, he's given permission to folks who always harbored contrarian ideas about the direction of the country to now pursue those contrarian notions, right? Everything from civil rights and women's rights to the treatment of the poor, to the treatment of foreign countries, and then, of course, climate policy. So when all the norms are erased in our national leadership, it's odd to see the ramifications that find themselves expressed locally and here in Massachusetts, even in Massachusetts. Now, we're holding the line better than a lot of places. But what I see isn't so much capitulation as signs of stress. So the question is, how do we hold firm as these stress signals begin to pop up in unexpected places sometime? That's where we are now. And it does start with, of course, with an issue that actually is being tested today in places like New Jersey. This concept of, which is real, that people are finding it hard to afford the basics. It might be food stamps. It might be, in our case, energy costs. There is both, of course, a central truth here that we've got to wrestle with and engage with, and that Mothers Out Front, and I might add the legislature, has successfully engaged with last session, where we really focused on keeping things affordable, in large part by making sure that we don't commit ourselves to 30 years of gas at the same time that we're committing ourselves to 30 years of electric power. You can't build out both systems at once without breaking the bank. And so we've made our choice. We believe we're going to have a very robust grid of necessity. That means we have to really impose the brakes on a permanent or semi-permanent long-term commitments to gas. And that is a hard consensus to maintain across the political front entirely in the state. And so, in any event, we have a bill submitted in January or so of 2025 by Governor Healy. Lots of interesting stuff in this bill, contributed, I think, from different elements of the executive branch and by extension, by some interests who were communicating with the executive branch. Good stuff for the most part, but problematic in some important respects. What it lacks at the moment is a strategic response to the devastation Trump is directing towards climate policy for the country and really for the world, although Massachusetts gets swept up in it. So you've got a lack of a clear articulation of how we're going to stay the course and how we're going to make progress despite the pressures imposed on us by DC. And I'll give you an example of where I hope the legislature can contribute to the governor's package. Where do you go forward on clean energy? We know you've got to constrain gas, and we did some important things, not everything we would have liked, but important things with respect to gas last session. And then what do you substitute for gas at a time when offshore wind is stymied? Logically, in Massachusetts, if you're interested, among many other things, in our economy being energy independent and not the slave to wild fluctuations in fossil fuel prices, you have to go to solar once gas is significantly constrained. And so you would like to see the House and the Senate, and I think there may be common ground here between the House and the Senate. I'm cautiously optimistic that both branches appreciate that if you can't do the clean energy thing in the short term in every way you'd like with respect to offshore wind, that you find a way to double down on solar so that there are alternatives to fossil fuels as we encourage people to, just to stay warm in winter, to charge what we hope are still increasing inroads by electric vehicles and the like. That's an important area where we can do some interesting stuff. And I'll give you one example. Last night, I attended Lexington Town Meeting. We're building a new high school. A number of your communities have built new high schools. This is a big one. And because there are lots of climate advocates in my hometown, brilliant people really, this new high school, which has to accommodate roughly over about 2,400 kids in the 4 grades, is going to be net positive, maybe even net positive, not just net zero, meaning that there'll be more energy generated by the solar panels and such than the high school consumes. That would be a wonderful thing, a path-breaking demonstration to have made. Last night, in a key climactic vote, we approved the significant expense for this new high school. But in current law, thrown in there a decade or so ago, there's a limit on what each municipality can do in all its municipal projects accumulated. It could be solar panels on the high school. It could be solar panels on the DPW building, maybe out at the town's old dump, the transfer station. 10 megawatt limit on what each of your towns can do. Now, there is a list. It's hard to find, but it is available online. I forget what you'd have to Google. But there is a list of which communities are coming up on their 10 megawatt limits. And it's hair raising. Interestingly enough, in the top 25, Lexington is not there. Actually, a lot of blue towns in greater Boston aren't there, but are actually coming very close. Here's why they're not in the top 25, about to exhaust their 10 megawatt caps. It's because land is less expensive outside greater Boston. And as a consequence, a lot of solar stuff has been put in central Mass, western Mass, and southeastern Mass near Fall River, New Bedford. So interestingly, the communities that are close to their municipal 10 megawatt caps for solar are a lot of purple towns, a lot of where solar's been doable because the land, as I say, is affordable, and the municipal governments have certainly been receptive and interested in taking advantage of the grants that are made available. So we've got a lot of communities throughout Massachusetts that can benefit by our lifting the cap, and not just the usual suspects, as I say, the liberal towns that you might settle on. It would be terrific if in this bill we could lift the 10 megawatt cap. And I want to give this idea, by the way, isn't original with me. I've got a friend and a person who advises me a lot on solar energy. We've got Cindy Ahrens, who's actually been active with Mothers Out Front in Lexington. We've got Mark Sandine. So these folks noticed that while Lexington isn't right up against the cap the way that Bridgewater is, nevertheless, we've got so many municipal projects that we'd like to throw into the breach. Offshore wind is paralyzed for the moment. We'll go heavy on solar, keep the clean energy alternative to gas coming. And they anticipate, as a consequence, our hitting our 10 megawatt cap. So I don't want to belabor the point, but you can see that with a relative bit of legislative surgery, relatively precise, I mean, you could lift that 10 megawatt cap. It's not a complex provision to draft, but we need to shift the focus. The current mood involving energy affordability is one of defensiveness. We've got to, this would be a misread of what we've done. We perhaps extended ourselves too far in the clean energy direction. It's now costing people a bundle. We've got to cut back. Don't tell us about anything new. Defense is the order of the day. What's really going on, of course, is that we've barely gotten started in the clean energy revolution. There are significant stresses on our electric and gas bills, but they're fossil fuel based. We hadn't cranked into the expenses that we anticipate from an offshore wind industry that's now not going to develop on schedule, or from a build out of the grid, something we approved in 2024, but haven't started yet. The cost stresses right now are fossil fuel based, and they have to do with fluctuating prices worldwide on the natural gas market. And they have to do with a lot of legacy costs that we've incurred in order to build out the gas grid in the past. We do have to save people money. We have to recognize, though, the true source of expense here. And we have to make sure that we somehow move ahead on the solar front so that we don't find ourselves locked into new 30 and 40-year amortizations of new gas infrastructure. So there are a number of things we can do. I want to actually create time for questions and answers, so I don't want to go further down this road, except to say this. My concern is that there is an air of defeatism that's infecting all of us, sometimes in subtle ways. Maybe we don't even acknowledge it for ourselves. We think our only option is to play defense. There is a lot of defense to be played. I'm not minimizing the assaults we're facing, but even in this moment, we need a strategic plan for moving forward. Mothers Out Front has always been strategic. This is a time when we have to say to legislators, rethink your assumptions. We're not in retreat. That's no way to position Massachusetts to succeed in the world. Think less about Trump. He is a passing breeze, historically speaking, an ill breeze to be sure, but he's going to be gone in 3 years. That's a snap of the fingers even in terms of the planning horizons for clean energy, which typically unfold over 8 to 12 years. So he's an obstacle. He's not a deal killer. Let's not pretend that he can kill the clean energy evolution here. Let's keep our eyes on the longer term prize. With that, I want to thank you guys again for having me, and I'm interested in what you've got to suggest or to say.
Senator, thank you so much for those remarks. We're really grateful to get your insights and your sort of thinking about the vision of where the climate bill might go and what we can do under the current constraints. Can you just for maybe a minute just speak about the process, sort of what we might expect over the next year, and then I'll get to some content questions. So maybe just briefly touch on the process.
Well, the governor always has a choice with regard to any bill she files as to whether to make it a House bill or a Senate bill. She's made choices in either direction in the 2 years or 4 years she's been in office, 3 years. In any event, she chose to make this a House bill. So the House has to act first on this climate stuff. It could easily happen before Thanksgiving, which is to say it could happen next week, that you would see a House bill pop up. Or not. This is extremely gnarly stuff. It's 119 double-spaced pages, 63 discrete provisions, each one of them very dense with legal jargon and language. You really have to parse the language of the bill word by word, and my staff and I are doing that. in order to figure out what the heck would even be done. So there's a lot of, and it could be the House will not make, I think, an informal deadline we've expected them to make, which is to put this on the House floor for debate before Christmas. I'm sorry, before Thanksgiving. Once you pop past Thanksgiving, it could still happen before Christmas or before Hanukkah. But the sweet spot typically for legislative action is in the next 2 weeks. So we could be surprised with a full draft relatively soon, or as I say, not. And I'm cautiously optimistic the House draft will include some good things. One just doesn't know.
Okay, super. Thank you. Let me just read some of the questions from the chat, if that's okay. And again, you don't have to, you can be brief if it's brief. This question is, how are you thinking about data centers, and might it be a topic that can be addressed in the affordability bill?
The way I'm thinking about it is we're not going to have many. We are not a part of the country targeted for these data centers. I would not want to see, we're going to need some because this AI stuff is real, I'm convinced. So it's not as if we can abstain, but we're not going to be stressed in terms of our provision of electricity because of data centers. They're going into the mid-Atlantic states, they're going into the South. The big seven, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Meta, are not proposing to build around here. We don't have the water to cool the server farms. We don't have, of course, the excess electricity. They're going elsewhere for the most part. I don't want to overstate this, but that's not a priority because I don't think it's a major threat.
Okay. How about can the legislature promote creating virtual power plants and time of day electricity rates in Massachusetts? I think as you know, just to educate the folks listening, those are ways to avoid expensive build outs of the grid. It's sort of considered smart, modern distribution these days. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, there's a lot in this bill, and I want to give the Healey administration credit here. There's a lot in this bill that has to do with these virtual power plants or other things, grid enhancing technologies, load management and demand management strategies. We've got a lot of good stuff we can do in the legislation. Virtual power plants are essentially software that would take the solar panels on my roof and link them effectively with the solar panels on yours. As a practical matter, most of these VPPs are going to be owned by private sector players. Sunrun already owns my panels. They may well own some of yours. Sunrun is really into hooking them together so that virtually the cumulative effect is the capacity to generate a lot of clean electricity. So yes, we need to let that technology unfold. And I'm not convinced, though, that the legislation is deficient. I think Healey anticipated this stuff. Okay,
super. Another question is, shouldn't we also be doubling down on building out thermal energy, given that's another local control energy source, renewable energy source that doesn't, rely on the volatile imports?
I think we should be very interested in geothermal, but I do think we need to rethink it a little bit. There was a time very recently when we assumed that we would be moving off natural gas so quickly that the primary role of geothermal was to give the gas companies and the workforce an alternative thing to do, something that was clean, by the way. That's not quite the way the market is evolving. Instead, the primary role for geothermal is probably not in a utility scale way, but on a campus. Think an office park, a life sciences center, maybe a data center, if any get built, probably not in Massachusetts, but in Connecticut or some other place. Think about your college, your university, a medical complex like Longwood. Network geothermal is probably going to link together a specific number of discrete buildings, but not an extraordinary number of them. And you realize some economies of scale, connecting piping to individual heat pumps in each building and providing some vertical and horizontal exposure to pick up additional heat from the earth to feed into all those discrete buildings. That is not utility scale stuff. That is a major construction project, but a conventional major construction, no more complicated than building a high rise in downtown Boston. It doesn't deserve to be the exclusive province of the gas companies. So you would want to rethink the approach that all of us have supported verbally, and you would probably want to expose those who would propose to own geothermal to market competition. You'd probably want to have a lot of players. Right now, Smith College and Mount Holyoke are installing network geothermal systems. They're going to own them, just like they own the buildings above the ground. They're not handing it over to a gas utility to own. They can figure out how to finance this, not easily, but they can figure it out. So I just want to be sure that we let gas companies play, and we give gas companies employees the opportunity to construct this stuff in competition with others who might want to play, so that we don't wind up with a new monopoly that we needn't have created.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm going to extract a part of a question and just ask you, would you say that the legislation you are working on is really focusing on reducing peak demand, which is such a driver of costs?
No. Remember, we're in this situation where too many folks are thinking defense. So the uniting theme behind these very disparate and disconnected elements in the governor's bill is to control costs rather than to think creatively about the ways of moving forward. That's the new balance I'd like Mothers Out Front help in introducing. Would be to make sure that defense and cost containment, as important as it is, and it is important politically too, isn't the only thing we see in the legislation.
Can you just wrap up by expounding on that more with a directive of what would be the best use of our activism and our time, with that as a launching pad of what we need to do?
Well, I think I believe I may have said it, Karen, pretty much in my opening statement. We've got to make sure that we don't default back to locking us into 40 years of reliance on an extremely volatile energy source, gas. The conservative idea used to be diversification. Diversify your retirement portfolio. Diversify this, diversify that. We're not diversified. We're overly dependent on fossil fuels in Massachusetts, and we have no extractive energy, as you all know. We don't take oil or gas out of the ground. We do, or we could take energy out of the sun. We could port it from windmills wearing just off our shore. We could become energy independent and support the elements of the economy in which we've been strong. But instead, because Trump, I think, effectively has declared war on New England, he doesn't care about us. I'm not sure he cares about the Northeast, and he would have us become more dependent in a sole source kind of way on essentially just on gas and oil. Good, prudent, conservative thinking argues that we go into solar and that we find a way to resuscitate wind, and that we do virtual power plants and everything else too. You don't have to be against anything. You just have to be in favor of the idea that we're got all our eggs in a basket that is also killing the planet.
That's for sure. Thank you so much, Senator Barrett. We are so grateful for your information and your being so accessible to us, and just speaking with us as peers who really want to be on board with you to pass the best climate bill possible this year. And we know we have a champion in you, and we know you'll do everything you can to make this climate bill as good as it can be in the political climate. And we will do our part. So I'm going to turn it over to Marjorie, maybe, to talk about the action.
Right. I'm Marjorie Davies, and I'm a member of the Cambridge chapter of Mothers Out Front, and I'm also one of the co-coordinators of the statewide campaign team. So today we're going to go over today's actions. We've already delivered a package of testimonies from the October action call to the TUE, along with a cover letter referring to specific legislative actions that we would like to see. So today we are asking all of you to do a simple action. Send your own personalized letter to the TUE committee. We have created an easy tool with a prepared letter that explains the bills we are supporting today. the Tactical Transition Bill, and the Municipal Empowerment Bill. We provide instructions in the toolkit to click for the email tool, personalize the text a bit, and click to send. Easy. And I did it this morning, and it is easy. And when you are done with that simple task, we ask that you share this action with your friends across Massachusetts. Deb will put the link for the action toolkit in the chat. Click on the link in the chat to open the toolkit. Read the short background material, then under step 1, click the link to open up our tool to email the TUE. You will start by completing the contact info at the top of the form. Then, add your own personal testimony to the prepared testimony. Click Next to send your message. The toolkit has 2 sets of instructions. One set for those who sent testimony during the October action call, and one set for those writing testimony for the first time. Be sure to look at the instructions that apply to you. And then, after you send this testimony, please follow the instructions in step 4 to share this action with your friends. In the resources section at the bottom, there are info sheets on our 2 priority climate bills. Deb, can you put the link to our toolkit into the chat again? We will have about 13 minutes to take our action. And finally, an important note. The deadline for submission is tomorrow, Wednesday, November 5th at 5 p.m. You need to complete your personalized letter and send it before 5 p.m. tomorrow for it to be considered by the TUE committee. And when sharing this action with your friends, be sure to include this info about the deadline.
Thanks, Marjorie. Deb's going to drop that toolkit link in the chat one more time, and we're all going to be quiet for the next 10 minutes or so, 12 minutes, so we can take this action together. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. If you're really struggling with the technology, don't worry, because you'll get the instructions by email later today. But if possible, you can get your testimony written right now. It's just a few little sentences to personalize. And we'll see you back here probably 12:41 or 12:42. And what a special opportunity today to hear directly from Senator Barrett, a real climate champion for us in the State House. But we need many more legislators from across the Commonwealth to support our priority bills. Every month that we do these calls together, our voices get louder and more decision makers hear us. And it's going to take this action to tip the scales in favor of real climate solutions. That is the power of our movement. Later today, you will receive a follow-up email. It will have links to a recording of this call. It'll have the slides and the toolkit that we shared today. We encourage you to forward that email to your networks. Tell your friends and neighbors about what you learned today, and be sure to remind them about the deadline for taking action tomorrow, Wednesday, November 5th at 5 p.m. We have announcements of 3 events coming up in the next month. First, thank you to those who turned out in blue shirts for last week's hearing for 2 of our important priority bills. We just learned that the hearing for the last of our priority bills is on Thursday, next Thursday, November 13th at 1 p.m. in hearing room B2. It's easiest to find this hearing room if you come in through the entrance on the side on Ashburton Place. Let's join with our allies to protect environmental justice communities and stop new or expanded high-pressure gas pipes. Mothers Out Front hosts a welcome call the second Friday of every month at noon. So we have one coming up next week, Friday, November 14th, 12 noon to 1 p.m. If you've asked yourself, what more could I be doing to stop climate change? Then you should join us on this call. We will work to help you identify the U-shaped hole in this movement. We want to help you find ways that you can use your unique talents, skills, and experiences to build a stronger and more effective, more inclusive movement for change. So join us and bring a friend. Deb will put the RSVP link in the chat. And finally, we want this climate action call to be on your calendar every month. Our next climate action call will be on Tuesday, December 2nd at noon. That's right after Thanksgiving. We will have a presentation and action in honor of the United Nations World Soil Day from our Healthy Soils, Livable Futures group. State Senator Joanne Comerford will be speaking about important PFAS legislation in Massachusetts. You won't want to miss this one. So Deb, can you drop this final link into the chat? Thanks. So many thanks to all of you for joining today, and especially to Senator Barrett for sharing his time and his perspectives with us. Stay warm and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you again in December.